Hello, my name is Lisa Schroeder, and I am the Great Egg Harbor River Watershed Ambassador for the AmeriCorps program. That means I basically do three things. I do education, like right now, and I do stewardship projects like rain barrel workshops, and I conduct stream assessments throughout my watershed to assess whether there's healthy habitat in my watershed. So what is a watershed? That's what we're going to be learning about today. Some people, when they think of watershed, they don't really know what it means, and they think it's like a wetlands or some kind of natural feature, or they think it's a building because they hear the word shed. But I actually have a model of a watershed here. And this whole thing is a watershed. It's not just one particular area or one building. This whole thing is a watershed. So let's take a little tour of the watershed so you have an idea of what all is going on here. So we have some farm agricultural area up here and a factory, so it's some industry. We have some bare exposed dirt here for construction. We have a house. We have a bridge, there's traffic, we have a resort, there's boats in the water, left from these docks. There's, this is a whole town, right? There's all sorts of things here, and natural features. We have trees, we have a nice bay, there is water in here, and it might be hard to tell. Yeah, a river, all sorts of things. So what do all these things have in common to make them one watershed? Some of them are natural, some of them are man-made, and the answer is how water moves is what unites a watershed. So the thing that connects this whole town and this bay and all these buildings and the farm, the thing that connects all these different things is that when it rains on any of these places, it will all end up in the same body of water. So I mentioned before that I'm the ambassador for the Great Egg Harbor River Watershed. That means that I serve the whole area of land where whenever it rains anywhere on that land, it ends up in the Great Egg Harbor River, and that's what makes the watershed. If it rains on your house and the water from your roof ends up draining to the Great Egg Harbor River, then you also live in the Great Egg Harbor River Watershed. But you might also even live in the same town as someone who does live in the Great Egg Harbor River Watershed, but the water from your roof goes to maybe the Mollica River, which means that you're in a different watershed even if you're in the same town. So the way water moves is what defines a watershed. Wherever water goes into a body of water, that whole basically drainage basin is what that body of water's watershed is, where the water comes from. So why is it important to understand that? The thing about understanding what a watershed is and how it works is that it helps us understand the impact of pollution. So I have a watershed here. Let's see what happens when it gets polluted. So lots of different types of pollution. The most common one that maybe we've all probably seen before might be trash, right? Litter. So let's put some trash on our model. So I see trash on the beach, they leave it, maybe by accident, maybe they just weren't really being responsible. Maybe they put their trash cans out or their recycling bin, and it's a windy day and it blows all over the street. Maybe when people are walking, they drop something on the sidewalk or the side of the road, or throw something out of their cars. Trash ends up all over the place, right? Another type of pollution that's pretty common that a lot of people might contribute to or have the potential to contribute to is dog poop. You might not think of that as pollution because it's coming from an animal, but it's animals that humans have brought, in large numbers to an area where they wouldn't really normally live. And so if you walk your dog and you let them poop on the sidewalk and you don't clean it up. I live in Philadelphia for many years, and I unfortunately see that definitely happen. Another thing that people do is they put the dog poop in a bag, but then just leave the bag around. And so really that's like leaving the dog poop and then also some litter, because now you're also just leaving a plastic bag on the ground. And even people with a yard and their dog might poop in their yard and they don't think about cleaning it up because it's like, well, it's not on the sidewalk. That still ends up being in the environment too, which, as we'll see, is a form of pollution, even if it's on your property. Another big source of pollution is from cars. So people think about cars causing air pollution, right? The gas in the air, but they can also cause this kind of land-based pollution like we're talking about here, where if the car is leaking, ooh, that squirted out a different direction than I was expecting. Sometimes it might go directly in the water, but a lot of times it's gonna be more on the road if it's leaking oil or gasoline. If you've ever seen a parking lot that has like a rainbow kind of puddle on it, that's oil, or it's at least water with oil in it. And so that can get just about anywhere cars go. We might leak oil, sometimes gasoline at a gas station, that might happen. Another big source of pollution that comes from a lot of different places is fertilizers and pesticides. So a lot of people who want really green lawns, they might put a lot of pesticides or fertilizers on their lawn, and some homeowners unfortunately don't always read the directions or don't do it correctly, so they put a lot more pesticides and fertilizers than they maybe should or they maybe need to. Farms a lot of times will use pesticides and fertilizers because they have so many plants and they want to make sure that their crops aren't destroyed. So it has its uses, but sometimes we can use too much. Other places might landscape, right? They want that nice green grass, so they put it all over. Wherever you see really green grass, there's probably been some fertilizer. What else have I got here? Another maybe unexpected form of pollution, which I think is our last example for today, is here at this construction site, it's dirt. And that sometimes surprises people because they think dirt's natural, right? How's that pollution? But naturally, dirt's covered up most of the time. And so when we dig up all the grass and plants and trees to have like a construction site, we're leaving a lot of exposed dirt that's exposed to the elements, to the wind and the rain, and it's not kind of stuck down by vegetation, by plant roots. It's not covered up and protected. So now we have a polluted watershed, one that's pretty realistic for a place where people are living and they're driving and they're fertilizing and all sorts of things. So the thing to really think about with watersheds is not just, okay, there's pollution right here, but it's what happens when it rains. We talked about water moving, right? So let's see what happens. Notice how, remember this water here in the bay, in the river, like there's a little bit of pollution in it now, but let's see what happens after it rains over the land. That water's not looking so clear anymore. It's not looking like water you'd want to swim in, probably. Not looking like water you'd want to fish in. It's not looking like water that animals would want to live in either. So the thing to remember with understanding a watershed is that what happens on land affects the water. When things go down the storm drain, some people think that it goes into like the treatment plant and it gets clean, so I can, whatever happens to the storm drain is fine, but the storm drain actually still goes directly out here into the bay here. Like this is an example of a storm drain right here. It goes directly out into the water. So whatever goes into our storm drain is unchanged, ending up in the natural environment. That's not the water that gets treated at a place like ACUA's wastewater in Atlantic City. So the thing to think about now that you understand a watershed is that you have an impact on water maybe miles away from you. If you lived on this farm, you're affecting this bay like all the way across town. So the thing to think about now that we understand watersheds is that you can have an impact, and it's up to you to choose whether it's positive, whether you make sure not to litter, you hold on to that trash until you get to a trash can, you clean up after your dog, you don't use a storm drain as a trash can, you use an actual trash can as a trash can. All these things you can do, you can choose to have an impact on water miles away from you. And that's what's so important about understanding a watershed. Thank you all for listening. And again, I'm Lisa Schroeder, the Watershed Ambassador for the Great Egg Harbor River Watershed.